Whether or not Daniel Brown was born into slavery is unknown, but he began life in a place where the harsh realities of life in a slave-holding society weighed heavily on all African Americans, whether slave or ostensibly free. During Daniel Brown's childhood, life for African Americans on Maryland's eastern shore was grim enough to darken their perceptions of the world around them. An observer untroubled by an oppressive social order might have considered the region a picturesque place with deeply indented inlets, an immense navigable waterfront, and easy access to transportation on the Chesapeake Bay. And the region's boosters might have described the farmland beyond the picturesque coastline as a place where melons and sweet potatoes flourished to perfection in the sandy soil. But for African Americans, it mattered very little whether they labored along the waterways or on the sandy inland farms. For most of them, painful experiences overshadowed the Eastern Shore's assets. Frederick Douglas, who fled from Maryland at about the time Daniel Brown was born, recalled that on the region's remote farms, whites could whip, beat, and even murder African Americans without fear of the law because killing a slave or any colored person was not treated as a crime, either by the courts or the community. After his escape from slavery, Douglas's memories of the place reflected his bitterness. Talbot County, located in the heart of the Eastern Shore, as Douglas recalled it, was remarkable for nothing, more than the worn-out, sandy, desert-like appearance of its soil, the general dilapidation of its farms and fences, the indigent, spiritless character of its inhabitants, and the prevalence of ague and fever. Daniel Brown, born in this place where he was vulnerable to the kinds of abuses Douglas described, might well have carried with him into adulthood memories that strengthened his resolve to resist an affront he perceived as rude or condescending, especially in a confrontation at the threshold of his home. Slavery shaped the society that made life dangerous for young African Americans like Frederick Douglass and Daniel Brown. But the violence Douglas described occurred at the very time slavery was declining in Maryland. In the century before the Civil War, a combination of circumstances, some economic and some ideological, undermined slavery in Maryland. One factor was market conditions, which eroded the economic basis for slavery in the state. At the same time, ethical and religious concerns weakened Marylanders' commitment to the institution. Slave labor could be exploited to the slaveholders' advantage in Maryland's tobacco-growing regions because the tasks required for tobacco production kept workers active throughout the year. As early as the mid-18th century, however, market conditions turned against Maryland's tobacco growers, and Eastern Shore farmers began to reduce tobacco production in favor of wheat, fruit, and vegetables, crops that called for periods of inactivity during their growing cycles. Then, from the Revolutionary era to the Civil War, the political ideals of the new American Republic, along with the theology and ethics of Quakers and Methodists, established an ideological foundation for manumissions. Manumissions increased, and by the middle of the 19th century, the mix of slave and free in the black population gave Maryland's Eastern Shore a distinctive social and demographic configuration. In 1790, slaves outnumbered free blacks in the Eastern Shore counties by 38,591 to 3,907. By 1850, however, slaves barely constituted a majority within the Eastern Shore's African American population, and by 1860, at about the time Daniel Brown reached maturity, free blacks in the region outnumbered slaves by a margin of 28,277 to 24,957. But manumissions did not make Maryland's African Americans free. White prejudices and fears continued to shape the state's social and political order.